It's a chilly December night in Myrtle Beach, and this young woman, Heather Elvis, she's just finished a first date. She seems happy, maybe a little nervous, heads home, talks to her roommate, and then, poof, gone.
Just like that.
Nobody sees her again.
Sends chills down your spine, right? One minute she's there, and the next she's just gone.
And as investigators start digging, they uncover this tangled web of relationships and secrets and lies. Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series, and today we're diving deep into the perplexing case of Heather Elvis.
It's a case that gripped the nation not just for the mystery, but for the complicated love triangle at its heart.
Right. So Heather, she was 20 years old, vibrant, artistic, working at a local restaurant, meets Sidney Moorer. He was a handyman, significantly older, and they begin an affair. What can you tell us about their relationship?
Well, from what we know, it seemed passionate, but also very volatile.
Volatile? How so?
A lot of reports of arguments, breakups, makeups, the kind of relationship that can swing from intense highs to dramatic lows.
We can't ignore the age difference between them, right? Did that play a role?
Almost certainly. Relationships with large age gaps often have those inherent power imbalances, right? One person might have more life experience or financial security or social influence, which can create a dynamic where one person is more dominant or controlling.
And in this case, that seems to have been Sidney Moorer.
Yeah.
But this wasn't just a straightforward affair.
No.
Sidney was married.
Right.
And his wife Tammy finds out about Heather.
Yes, and that's where things get even more complicated. Tammy's reaction to the affair was, by many accounts, extreme.
Extreme is what way?
There were reports of her harassing Heather, calling her incessantly, sending threatening messages, even confronting her in public.
So it sounds like she was really determined to break them up to get control back over her husband and their marriage.
Absolutely. And her actions, whether it was jealousy or anger or a desire to protect her family, just added another layer of complexity to this already volatile situation.
So we have Heather caught in this messy love triangle, feeling pressured, possibly even scared, and then on December 17, 2013, she vanishes. What happened in those final hours leading up to her vanishing?
Well, we know that Heather went on a first date that evening. She seemed to enjoy it, called her roommate afterward, sounding upbeat, and then received a call from Sidney Moorer shortly before her phone went silent. That call is crucial, but its contents remain a mystery.
And her car was found abandoned a couple of days later at Peachtree Boat Landing. But it wasn't just parked there.
No, there were several details about the car that raised red flags. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone much taller than Heather, suggesting someone else had driven it there. And all of her belongings, her purse, phone, keys, everything was missing.
That's not something someone does if they're just going for a walk or running away.
It certainly makes it less likely. Those details point towards something more sinister. It's as if someone wanted to make it look like she simply vanished to erase any trace of her presence.
So investigators start looking closely at the people closest to Heather, and that leads them right to Sidney and Tammy Moorer.
Makes sense. Their behavior after Heather's disappearance only fueled suspicions. Witnesses reported seeing them thoroughly cleaning their truck just days after she vanished, almost as if they were trying to remove any potential evidence.
You have to wonder what they were so determined to clean up.
Exactly. And then there are Tammy Moorer's social media posts. Instead of expressing concern for Heather or cooperating with the investigation, she seemed to be mocking the situation, posting these cryptic messages that many interpreted as taunts or attempts to deflect blame.
It seems incredibly insensitive considering a young woman had vanished and everyone was desperately searching for answers.
It's the kind of behavior that investigators find very suspicious. It suggests a lack of empathy, a detachment from the gravity of the situation that can raise serious questions about someone's involvement. And then there's this incident with the pregnancy test.
The pregnancy test. Tell me more about that.
Well, on the very night that Heather disappeared, Sidney Moorer was caught on camera buying a pregnancy test. Not exactly what you'd expect from someone involved in a missing persons case, right?
It's definitely an odd detail to come out, especially with the timing. What are we supposed to make of it?
Well, it's another piece of circumstantial evidence that raises a lot of questions. Was Tammy pregnant? Were they trying for a child? And if so, did they see Heather as an obstacle?
Add another layer to this whole tangled web of motives.
It does. And when you combine it with the other suspicious behavior, the cleaning the truck, the social media post, the phone call before she disappeared, it starts to paint a pretty incriminating picture.
But the most damning evidence has to be the cell phone data.
Oh, absolutely. Cell phone records place Sidney Moorer near the boat landing, right where Heather's car was found around the same time her phone went silent. Hard to call that a coincidence.
So we have a volatile relationship, a jealous wife, suspicious behavior after the disappearance, and cell phone data, putting Sidney near the scene. Seems like a pretty solid case. But there's a big problem, isn't there?
Yeah, the biggest challenge for investigators was that there was no body. Despite all the searches, Heather's remains were never found. And without a body, it's almost impossible to determine exactly what happened to her, how she died, or even if a murder took place.
Must have been incredibly frustrating for investigators trying to build a case without that crucial piece.
Absolutely. It makes it so much harder to establish a timeline or gather forensic evidence or definitively prove that a crime even occurred.
So what happened next? Did the lack of a body prevent them from being charged?
No, they were eventually arrested and charged, but the legal proceedings were complicated to say the least. Both Sidney and Tammy Moorer faced charges of kidnapping obstruction of justice, and in Sidney's case, indecent exposure related to some other incidents.
Let's start with Sidney's trial. What happened there?
Well, his first trial back in 2016 actually ended in a mistrial. The jury was deadlocked. They couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, which happens sometimes in cases that rely heavily on circumstantial evidence.
Why is that? Why do juries sometimes struggle with circumstantial evidence?
Jurors often want to see concrete proof, things like DNA or eyewitness testimony. Circumstantial evidence requires them to make inferences, connect the dots, and sometimes jurors interpret the same evidence in different ways or have different comfort levels with drawing conclusions from it.
So in Sidney's case, the jury couldn't agree on whether the circumstantial evidence was enough to convict him of kidnapping.
Right, but that wasn't the end of it. He was later convicted, but not for kidnapping. The conviction was for obstruction of justice based on lies he told investigators during the initial investigation. He ended up with a 10-year prison sentence.
And what about Tammy? How did her trial go?
Tammy's trial was in 2018 and had a very different outcome. She was convicted of both kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap and got a much longer sentence, 30 years.
Wow, 30 years without a body. That's pretty remarkable.
It is. It really speaks to the strength of the circumstantial evidence against her and how the prosecution convinced the jury that she played a key role in Heather's disappearance.
But it must be incredibly difficult for Heather's family, knowing that even with these convictions, they still don't know what happened to her or where she is.
Absolutely. This case highlights the unique challenges of no-body homicides. The absence of a body creates huge hurdles for investigators, prosecutors, and most importantly, for the families who just want answers and justice.
It's a reminder that even with convictions, sometimes the full truth stays hidden and leaves this lingering sense of uncertainty. It's just heartbreaking. Even with the convictions, Heather's case, it's still open, and her family is still out there searching for those answers for closure.
It really emphasizes the importance of continued investigation even after you get convictions. Technology advances, new evidence might come up, or somebody might finally come forward with something they've been holding back. There's always hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of hope, the Elvis family has shown some incredible strength and resilience through all of this. I mean, they've channeled their grief into action, setting up the Find Heather Elvis Foundation, raising awareness about missing persons, and advocating for families facing similar tragedies.
It's inspiring. It would be so easy to just give in to despair, but they've chosen to fight to keep her memory alive, to use what they've been through to help others.
It's really powerful, the love and the bond between families.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before we wrap up, I think our listeners might be wondering about Sidney and Tammy Moorer. What's going on with them now?
Good point. As of today, they're both still in prison. Tammy is still incarcerated for kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap, and Sidney's serving time for obstruction of justice.
So despite not having a body, the justice system did hold them accountable in some way, even if we don't know exactly what happened.
Exactly. And that's important for people to understand. Even in these nobody homicides, justice can be served. Circumstantial evidence, when it's gathered and presented carefully, can be really powerful.
This case also shows just how devastating toxic relationships can be. Not just for the people involved, but for everybody around them. The jealousy, the manipulation, the anger, it all created this pressure cooker that led to tragedy.
It's a reminder that we all need to pay attention to those red flags in our own relationships and the relationships of people we care about. Are there patterns of control? Are there manipulations? Is there abuse? Are conflicts getting worse and nobody can resolve them? Recognizing these warning signs early on can really prevent things from spinning out of control.
It's true. We all have to look out for each other and speak up when something seems off. Sometimes just stepping in can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And as we finish up our deep dive into Heather Elvis's case, we want our listeners to really think about what this story means to them. What did you take away from it? What questions are still in your mind?
Yeah, what emotions did this case bring up for you?
Yeah.
And will you do anything differently in your own life because of what you learned about Heather's story?
Because these conversations, even though they can be tough, are so important. They help us see how complex human behavior is, how fragile life is, and how important it is to keep fighting for justice, even when it's a long and uncertain road.
Heather's story, even with all the unanswered questions, it's a powerful reminder of hope and resilience and the love of family. Her case is still open, her family is still searching, and maybe someday those answers will come.
We hope so. In the meantime, we encourage you to check out the Find Heather Elvis Foundation, and if you can support their work to raise awareness about missing persons and advocate for families who've lost loved ones.
And if you have any information about Heather's disappearance, anything at all, even if it seems small, please contact the authorities. Every little piece could help get us closer to the truth.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the Heather Elvis case. We hope this deep dive made you curious and encouraged you to think about the complexities of crime and the fight for justice.
And as always, we invite you to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle and our YouTube channel for more deep dives into fascinating and thought-provoking true crime cases. We're always digging into new stories, uncovering the truth, and seeking justice for those who can't speak for themselves.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and stay vigilant.